And really for some of us it might be kind of a reminder. But we're going to talk to those that might be here this morning who are hesitating in their obedience. And we're also talking to those that are going to be viewing this in the next few weeks. And we continue to get pretty good numbers on our recordings. As we shared with you not too long ago, there are over 1,000 people that in South America that are watching this very recording. And so we're happy for that, and we hope that that number continues to be that high. And if you're not sharing the website with other people, do that, because we do put the bulletins and the lessons that we have been sharing on that website. You know, I shared with you just a couple of weeks ago on a Sunday night that Christmas was my favorite holiday. Always has been. But there's also another day, not really a holiday, but it's a special day, I guess. But it's a day that I really don't like. No, it's not my birthday, although that's a close second now. But another day I just simply don't like is April Fool's Day. I don't like it. I never have liked April Fool's Day. And of course we all know that that's not an official holiday or anything of that nature, but that's a day in which people try to trick you into believing that something happened that didn't happen, and so on. My children have taken that to an art. Trying to fool Dad into believing that something happened when it didn't. I don't like that particular day. Now maybe it's because of the meaning of the word fool. I looked that word up in the dictionary. And the word fool means someone who is impetuous or someone who is unwise. I don't like that day because that simply does not describe me. Now, I'm of course just kidding. But there are many of us, I believe, friends, are very wise people. Many of us that are sitting here today are wise people. And the reason we are wise is because when that door of opportunity came for us for freedom, we stepped through that door. And so we are wise people. Now somebody might say, well, Tom, I really don't know if I agree with that or not. You know, we're wise, but we're not the wisest person who ever lived. Well, no. We all know that the wisest person who ever lived outside of Christ would be that of Solomon. If we was to turn to the book of 1 Kings in the Old Testament, in 1 Kings, the 3rd chapter, we would have Gideon appearing to Solomon in a dream, and God is speaking through Gideon. And in that dream, God, through Gideon, asked Solomon this question in 1 Kings chapter 3 and verse 5. God said, ask, what shall I give you? You know, I've always found that to be an interesting question. You know, if God asked that to any one of us, what shall I give you? What would we say? Well, I have no doubt that many people in the world would say, well, God, I could use this amount of money. Or I can use this new car. I can use a new home. Or I can use any type of thing in this world. Solomon certainly had that chance to say, I need riches. I need pleasure. I need other things. But when he was asked that question, his response was this. Let's jump down to verse 9. Therefore give to your servant, and I'm reading, by the way, from the New King James Version of the Bible. Therefore give to your servant an understanding heart to judge your people, that I may discern between good and evil. He could have asked for anything, but instead he asked for an understanding heart, that he might discern between good and evil. And God was pleased with that request. We jump down to verse 10. The speech pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said to him, because thou hast asked this thing, and have not asked for long life for yourself, nor have asked riches for yourself, nor have asked for the lives of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern justice. Behold, I have done according to your words, seeing I have given you a wise and understanding heart, so that there was not anyone like you before you, nor shall anyone like you arise after you. He was so pleased with that answer that he gave him that request, and he gave him great wisdom. So much to the point, if we turn over just one chapter, we find out in verse 30 of chapter 4. In fact, let's begin in verse 30. Thus Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the men of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt, for he was wiser than all men. He was wiser than all men. And so without a doubt, friends, he was the wisest who ever lived. But you and I, many of us who are sitting here today, many who are watching over the internet, they too are wise, because when the opportunity arose, they made the wise choice and accepted that opportunity for freedom. Accepted that opportunity for freedom. Turn, if you will, this time to the New Testament, to Matthew, the 27th chapter. Matthew chapter 27. And let's see an example of someone who was wise because he made the right choice when it was before him. Matthew, the 27th chapter. Let's begin at verse 15. We're going to kind of stop in the midst of some of this reading and talk about some other things. But let's begin there in verse 15, Matthew chapter 27. Now, at the feast of the governor was a custom to releasing to the multitude one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Now let's just stop there for a minute. They had a notorious prisoner. Now in the King James Version of the Bible, instead of the word notorious, we have the word notable. They had a notable prisoner. Now, like many words in the New Testament, they can be used in two different ways. And notable is such a one in the Greek. Notable could be used in a good sense, and it can be used in a bad sense. Which was the case here? Well, it was used in the bad sense. He was a notable, he was a notorious prisoner. Now, what had he done? Well, for one thing, we find out that Barabbas in John the 8th chapter and verse 40, he was a thief. Okay, so he wasn't notable in the good sense. He was notable in the bad sense. And not only was he a thief, but in Mark chapter 15 and verse 7, we find out that he was also a murderer. Now stop and think about this for a minute. What was his future looking like? Well, he was a thief, and he was a murderer. Under Roman law, even a thief would be crucified. Now, how do we know that a thief would be crucified? Well, Jesus was crucified with two others, and who were they? They were thieves. Stay in the same chapter, Matthew the 27th chapter, and let's go to verse 38. Verse 38. Let's prove what we have just said. Jesus was crucified with two robbers. Verse 38. Then two robbers, or thieves in the original language, were crucified with him, one on the right hand and the other on the left. And so Barabbas, what was he? Well, we found out in one passage that he was a thief. And so he was facing the cross. In Mark tells us that not only was he a thief, but a great insurrection arose, and Barabbas committed murder in that insurrection. An insurrection, I have no doubt, against the Romans themselves. The Romans considered that, they considered that to be treason against the empire. Plus, Barabbas was a Jew. And so he was a foreigner. And according to Roman law, those who would be traitors to the Romans, those who were foreigners, could be crucified, and he was a murderer on top of that. And so he was facing all of these things because he was a robber and because he was a murderer. Well, let's continue reading here. Verse 16. At that time they had a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. Therefore, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" Now let's stop here once again. What's going on here? Well, this was a custom of the Romans. At a special time, and the special time was the Passover. The special time was marking of Pilate's visit to Jerusalem. And whenever something like that happened, they liked to try to gain popularity with the people. And so Pilate, in an effort to try to free Christ, because he realized that Christ had been brought to him because of envy. Look down in verse 18. For he is referring back to Pilate in verse 17. For he knew that they had handed him, capital H, Christ, over because of envy. The word envy in the language New Testament means jealous. So the scribes and the chief priests and the elders, they were jealous of Christ. Why? Well, he was pretty popular. He had a lot of wisdom. He had a lot of power. And they were jealous of that. And they were afraid of that. And so out of jealousy, out of envy, they handed Jesus over. And Pilate knew that. And so in an effort to have Christ released, he made this offer. Therefore, verse 17, when they had gathered together, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" For he knew that they had handed him over because of envy. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife said unto him, "Have nothing to do with that just man, for I have suffered many things today in a dream because of him." But the chief priests and the elders persuaded the multitude that they should ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor asked and said to them, "Which of these do you want me to release to you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Then he released Barabbas to them, verse 26. Then he released Barabbas to them, and when he had scourged Christ, he delivered him to be crucified. You know, Barabbas was a thief, and he was a murderer. He was facing death upon the cross. But when an opportunity came, he made the wise choice. Could you imagine what he might have felt or what he might have thought when the Roman guard came to open that door that day and say, "You are free"? Now, he didn't deserve it, did he? No. He was a thief. He was a murderer. He deserved to be punished. He didn't deserve the mercy that was showed unto him. But when that soldier came and unlocked the door and said, "You are free," what he did, he accepted that opportunity. And he got up and he walked out the door free. He walked out the door free. What if he hadn't accepted that? Well, I'm pretty sure that what would have happened is the soldiers would have picked him up and they would have tossed him out. But he accepted it. And he got up and he walked out. You know, friends, the sad thing is that many people today, perhaps someone here, perhaps someone who is watching Perhaps all kind of people around the world where there's no perhaps to it, we know this to be the case. But there are many people who are just like Barabbas. Except you and I are prisoners to sin. In Romans chapter 3, verse 23, we are told, for all have sinned. Every single one of us has been a prisoner to sin. Many of us are still a prisoner to sin. Barabbas faced death. What do we face because of that way of life? Romans 6 and 23, for the wages of sin is death. We too face death. We face a spiritual death, far worse than anything physical, because there we're talking about an eternity apart from God. That is what we face. Barabbas, when he was given the opportunity for freedom, got up and he walked out. Many of us are staying still. When that opportunity, that door is open to us, instead of getting up and walking through, we sit back and we continue in sin. Well, somebody might say, well, you know what? One day Satan's just going to open the door and say, get out. That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen because he has us right where he wants us. He has us right where he wants us. And so if we're sitting back waiting for Satan just to let us go, it's never going to happen. But that opportunity is still there. That opportunity is there because Jesus, Matthew 20, 28, gave his life a what? A ransom for many. He paid the price so that the door could be opened. Friends, here's what is before us. We now, once again, have the choice. Do we choose to get up and accept that opportunity? Or do we choose to remain where we are? It's a very dangerous thing. One is a wise choice. The other one is a foolish choice. Which choice do you make today? If we have anyone here this morning who has not yet made the choice to walk through that door of freedom to your sins, we encourage you to do so. If we have anyone that is watching here today, we encourage you to do so. What do I need to do? Well, simply obey. Simply obey. Come believing. Repent of your sins. Turn away. Decide that you're going to live the right way instead of the wrong way. Confess Christ before men. Be baptized for the remission of your sins. And if you do that, you'll be free. And what a wise choice you have made. Because if you remain faithful unto death, then you have that chance of a home in heaven. Make a wise choice today. Don't make a foolish one. Don't continue in that state of being lost. The door is open. Jesus is standing before you. Won't you come? Why together we stand and we sing.
Have you been to Jesus for the cleansing power? Are you lost?